101.9 RXP, it's Matt Pinfield in the morning with Leslie Fram at 9:41. And in the studio, we had Mark Ronson here. He's still with us, which is great of you. Mark, of course, is a Grammy Award-winning, Brit Award-winning producer, artist, DJ, remixer. I mean, Mark's done a lot of great stuff. Mark, the first time you and I met was actually walking into an EMI Music Publishing Christmas party. We passed each other in the hallway, and I'm like,
Mark,
Mark,
you the nod of respect for services rendered to music over the years.
Well, thank you for that, Mark. I appreciate it, and right back at you with that, man. Much respect to you as well, and a fan, right? And I got to say, speaking of which, you know, on the iPod, we do our iPod feature where we spin it. Beach Boys' "Sail on Sailor" came up, which is a song I love. It's just one of these lost great Beach Boys singles, and from the 70s. Probably, many would argue their best song of the 70s. And here I was down visiting my 8-year-old daughter in Florida, and I was just going through it, and the song's just got this great desperation in it lyrically. And all of a sudden I decided to look for Beach Boys on YouTube to see if there was some footage. And instead, which was so great, I found a video of you and Sean Lennon performing the song on the, I think on a thing called The Proms on the BBC. Explain that to me, because you guys did an amazing version of it.
Isn't that terrible? Just because we have more hits on YouTube, it's the first thing that comes out that we're crapping all over the Beach Boys legacy. Me and Sean, I love that song. I was introduced to it only a couple of years ago. My dad, who really only listens to Exhibit and West Coast hip hop in his car, was having an emo moment and listening to Beck and the Beach Boys. And when that song came on, I asked him what it was, because it's not Brian Wilson. It's a really soulful vocal. It's Blondie. What's the guy's name?
Chaplin, yeah.
Yeah, and I just fell in love with it. And I was doing this show, The Electric Proms. The BBC presents the Proms, which is something that BBC does once a year in England. They take bands and put them with an orchestra, get them to do stuff they wouldn't usually do, like the Kaiser Chiefs and David Arnold did something together. Just kind of interesting. Whatever, boring. So we went on and we did the show, and Sean came up, and Sean and I have been best friends since we were 10, but never actually performed anything on stage together, even been in the studio. And I asked Sean if he wanted to come sing Sail on Sailor, because he's always been the biggest Beach Boys fan out of anyone I grew up with. So he came on and we did this version of the song with the BBC Orchestra. And it was a great night that night. Ricky Wilson came up and did Oh My God, and Tim Burgess came up and did The Only One I Know. Charlie from the Rumble Strips did Back to Black, and Adele, Santo Gold. It was pretty terrible.
What a great lineup of people to sing and perform.
It was really a good night.
Yeah, I'd never heard of it until I found that thing, The Proms, until I found this. I want to play it for everybody right now, because I like the way we're going to play the actual real intro from the TV show, because I like the way you kind of explain your friendship with Sean Lennon. You know,
I'm going to play the talking part.
Yeah, do you mind?
If you don't mind if I plug my ears, I can't even stand listening to my own voice. I've seen this thing a few times. It's especially cringy, this intro.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
But you know what? I already have it said. I'm sorry, Mark. Mark Ronson and Sean Lennon right now, and this is Sail on Sailor. 101.9 RXP, it's Mark Ronson and Sean Lennon. They're doing the great Beach Boys track, Sail on Sailor. Crazy thing behind that song where there were a couple people that might have been in the studio at the time, so there was lawsuits over a guy who said, I wrote one of the lyrics, and I wrote the other lyric, and this crazy lawsuit going on for years.
I put the word on.
I put on.
Sail, sailor, and no one's going to get it.
Yeah, it's put on in there. And then, of course, the guy got, $50,000 or something. It's Matt Pinfield in the morning with Leslie Fram. We're in the studio with Mark Ronson. And Mark has worked with everybody from being the only person allowed to work on a Dylan track, remix a classic, to producing the legendary Amy Winehouse album, Back to Black. And in just a bit, we have Nikolai from the Strokes is coming, who's a good friend of Mark's as well. And of course, also Tennessee Thomas, who's in the whose dad is Pete Thomas, who I admire. And I have a funny story that Tennessee and I are going to talk about our chance meeting a couple of years back in a little bit. But Mark, I read that one of the artists that you really admire is David Bowie, who's always been one of my favorites as well. I got to work with him a little bit at Columbia during the Heathen and Reality period. Tell me, obviously also, we've met many times over the years, but I was a huge fan always growing up. Bowie was one of my favorite artists throughout the 70s. And talk to me about why you mentioned him as an artist that you really have always admired.
It's weird. It's a bit like Dylan in that way, that I only discovered it lately, because these people, that these godheads of music, and the whole time everyone's told you how amazing they are, so you discover them and you don't even know where to start or what era. But I just think that there was those records that he made, all those records in the 70s, they're just, for me, the groove and drums and the rhythm section is always something that was really important, and he just fused it with brilliant melodies and arrangements, and I don't know, he's just made some of the most amazing records ever. I can't really get that much deeper into it.
I imagine as a producer too, you hear things a little bit differently, you know, than most people. What else have you, you know, discovered lately from the past, whether it was an artist or a song?
Actually, being around in England a bit, like all this sort of psychedelic folk stuff that they kind of, you know, they put out some of those compilations, the Nuggets compilations, and all these bands like The Creation, but even more obscure bands like July and stuff, the 60s sort of psych rock folk stuff that's really amazing. All these bands that kind of never had these, like, weren't even one-hit wonders, probably like 145, that just are kind of as good as anything that was out during that era.
There's actually these box sets that are out that I got. Rubble was one collection after Nuggets, and Mind Rocker. So they had all this stuff.
Yeah.
And you can buy these boxes that have 10 CDs in them. And it's a lot of people that end up going on to be in big bands in the 70s, but in the 60s made one or two
like
singles.
Dan Pallion's Chariot and all these sort of, like,
exactly.
Yeah, definitely.
And one of those guys was, wasn't Andy Summers in there for like a minute?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No one realized Andy Summers is like 78 years old or something. He looks amazing.
Isn't it amazing how good he looks considering he was in Zoot Money? He was almost, this is the thing I mentioned the other day,
Yeah.
he was almost the replacement for Mick Taylor in the Stones. They were talking to him for a moment before Ronnie Wood became the guitar player,
Wow.
which is pretty crazy. But hey, you know what?
He's
All's
done
hell that
okay.
ends well. The
He's
Police.
done okay, yeah.
Right? Well,